Hello. In today's video, I thought I would talk really rather aimlessly about one of my favourite poets, John Keats. So firstly, if you don't know who Keats is or was, he was an English romantic poet born in 1795 in Moorgate, which is in London. And personally speaking, I'm going to be talking mainly personally so that I don't give you any poor information. I have a weird, I suppose what you might call a psychogeographical connection to Keats, in the sense that I have ended up quite accidentally following him around London throughout my life. And by that I mean wherever I go, it seems Keats has also been. And this is very odd, and it's something that I've only recently realised looking back at my life. So my first job, I happened to be working just across the road from where Keats's parents got married. So in isolation, that's not too unusual at all. But then my second job, I was just working down the road from where Keats was born. Not that we know for certain that he was born in this place. It's in Moorgate. I think we know definitely he was born in Moorgate, but we don't know that he was born at what is now a pub called the Globe. The pub itself is quite unusual actually, in that it used to be two pubs, and then and one was called the Keats, the John Keats, and the other was called the Globe, and then they merged and they became just the Globe, or sometimes the Keats at the Globe. It's quite confusing because on maps it's called the Globe, but in person they still have the sign up on the pub that says Keats at the Globe. So if you're not local, not that there really are locals there, it's just offices and things there these days, but if you don't regularly go to that pub, it can get a bit confusing if someone tells you to meet them at the Globe, for instance, because it's got a different name on the outside, or at least it used to when I was around there. So where am I going with this? Oh yes, so the pub before all that, before it was two pubs and then one pub, it was an inn and a stable, and that was owned by John Keats's father, and he called it the Swan and Hoop. So, yeah, I don't know why I just told you all that. A little bit of strange history for you. It's a little odd, but that's London. So if you visit that pub today, you'll see a brown plaque at the top of the building, which is very easy to miss if you're not looking for it, partly because it's brown and blends in with the building, and partly because it's too high up. But nonetheless, the plaque is there, and it says, "In a house on this site, the Swan and Hoop, John Keats, poet, was born 1795, which I think is a rather meagre sign for poor old Keats, but there you go. So still, it's not too weird, my connection to Keats. I've moved from one place where his parents got married across the road from where I'm working, and then I moved to another where that's where he was born. But then, at the same time that I was working there was a church nearby that I used to go to just on my lunch breaks now and then, just as somewhere to be, to sit quietly for 10-15 minutes, take time out of the day away from the busy city, and just sit there and switch off for a bit, and just find a moment of peace, really. And I would go there quite a lot. And I did that for years. And then one day I found out that church that I kept going to was the same church in which Keats was baptised. So that's a little odd as well. And when I found that out, I returned to the church because, as a fan of Keats, I wanted to look at it now that I had that information. And I actually saw his baptismal font and touched it. So I have held a font in which little baby Keats was baptised, which is a rather peculiar thought. And I spoke to the vicar there, and he told me that it is the original, that is the same font in which Keats was baptised, and they have it recorded, and they know it to be true. But then it gets even stranger, because then I moved house and, flat. And the flat that I was staying in was, again, just down the road from where Keats lived as an adult. And this was unintentional too. So Keats's house now, which is called Keats's house, that house has been turned into a museum. And so when I discovered it was there, I went there quite regularly, actually. It's a lovely museum, surrounded by lovely things. There's a lot of green out there. It's on a heath. And it's just a nice place to be. And so I have spent time in just about every room in Keats's house. So I've sort of followed him from cradle to not quite grave, because he died in Italy. But he became severely ill in the UK, and he actually travelled to Italy because he thought the climate would maybe help him survive. Unfortunately, it didn't. He had tuberculosis, and he died very, very young. He died at the age of 25. Tragic, really. But I followed him around accidentally, which I think is quite nice. I'm glad that that's happened. As Keats said, a thing of beauty is a joy forever. That's maybe a quote of his that you might know, and that you might not know is Keats. He also said, beauty is truth, truth beauty. That's all ye know on earth, and all ye need to know. And how right he was. The things of beauty he left us include an ode on a Grecian urn, ode to a Nightingale, Endymion, the Eve of St. Agnes. Oh, that's a wonderful poem. Overlooked, I think, overlooked. The Belle Dame Sans Merci, Hyperion, and much, much more, much more. Even his letters are wonderful to read, if tragic, particularly towards the end. His final letter, I struggle to read, because it's so sad. The last thing he wrote, I believe, was to a friend of his, and he apologised for being ill, and he knew he was dying, and he was apologising for it. He said he apologised for always giving an awkward bow. So sad. But there's so much not to be sad about, because we have his poems. But it does make you wonder what beauty must have died with him, in the sense of poems and stories and visions that we'll never know, swept away along with him. But perhaps I can end this by reading one of my favourite poems from my favourite book on Keats. Actually, I should talk about these books. I haven't done that yet. I do apologise. Been rambling away. So this is a biography on Keats by Andrew Motion, and this is the best biography on Keats. It's a big old book. It will take you a while. Don't rush through it. It's not that kind of book. So, yes, if you want to read about Keats, this is really the only book you need. This has everything in it. So, that's the biography. And then this is just a collection of poems and letters. In fact, maybe I can find that letter. The ending of it, just the last few sentences. Oh, there it is, yeah. So he wrote this to his friend Charles Brown on the 30th of November 1820. That's the year in which he died, I believe. And just at the end here, he says, "Write to George as soon as you receive this and tell him how I am as far as you can guess. And also a note to my sister, who walks about my imagination like a ghost. She is so like Tom. I can scarcely bid you goodbye, even in a letter. I always made an awkward bow." Well, I sent shivers down my spine. So Tom was his brother, who incidentally has the same birthday as me. There's another connection, although I think you can find connections when you're looking for them, can't you? Yes. So this is not a particularly special book. I don't really like it when they put there was a film about Keats called Bright Star. I think it was mainly about his relationship with Fanny Brawne, who was his what would you call it, girlfriend, I suppose, partner. They were deeply in love, but it was cut short. So that's that book. But this one here is my favourite Keats book. And as silly as it is, I carry it with me pretty much everywhere I go, because it's small enough to fit in my wallet, and I take my wallet everywhere, so I take this everywhere. And it's nice. It's very comforting, actually, knowing that in my pocket I always have his poems if I ever want to escape, or if I ever need a thing of beauty. I have it here. It's a little silly when I say it out loud, but it does give me pleasure. It helps me through life, and it's a nice book. Just aesthetically, it's nice to feel, nice to hold, nice to touch. I like small books. Secondhand, someone has written here October 1945, so it's been through a lot. That's not too loud. So it says the Kingsgate Pocket Poets, a selection from the works of John Keats, arranged by Walter Fancutt. I don't know who he is. So this was first published in 1943. So this was published during the Second World War. So there's a short page of biographical notes, just one page, and then a selection of poems. And I would like to read you... Endymion is a great poem. It's long, though. And there you go, that's where, of course, the famous line, the first line. This was written about Thomas Chatterton, who was another very interesting poet who died very young. A genius. He was... I'll get this all wrong, but he was, I think, translating ancient Greek at the age of 12 or something like that. But he died very young. I'll do another video on him, perhaps when I've done some proper research. I don't know him as well as Keats at all. Whereas Keats I can ramble away a little bit. So, my favourite poem, it's not an unusual favourite. You probably know it. It's To a Nightingale, Ode to a Nightingale. and I'll just read it for you now. My heart aches, and a drowsy numbness pains my sense, as though of hemlock I had drunk, or emptied some dull opiate to the drains 1 minute past, and Lethe-wards had sunk. 'Tis not through envy of thy happy lot, but being too happy in thine happiness, that thou, light-winged dryad of the trees, in some melodious plot of beech and green, and shadows numberless, singest of summer in full-throated ease. Oh, for a draught of vintage that hath been cooled a long age in the deep-delved earth, tasting of flora and the country green. Dance and Provençal song and sunburnt mirth. Oh, for a beaker full of the warm south, full of the true, the blushful hippocrene, with beaded bubbles winking at the brim, and purple-stained mouth, that I might drink and leave the world unseen, and with thee fade away into the forest dim. Fade far away, dissolve, and quite forget what thou among the leaves hast never known, the weariness, the fever and the fret, here where men sit and hear each other groan, where palsy shakes a few sad last grey hairs, where the youth grows pale and spectre thin, and dies, where but to think is to be full of sorrow and leaden-eyed despairs, where beauty cannot keep her lustrous eyes, or new love pine at them beyond tomorrow. Away, away, for I will fly to thee, not charioted by Bacchus and his pards, but on the viewless wings of Persy, though the dull brain perplexes and retards. Already with thee, tender is the night, and haply the queen moon is on her throne, clustered around by all her starry fays. But here there is no light, save what from heaven is with the breezes blown through verdurous glooms and winding mossy ways. I cannot see what flowers are at my feet, nor what soft incense hangs upon the boughs. But in embalmed darkness guess each sweet, wherewith the seasonable month endows the grass, the thicket, and the fruit-tree wild, white hawthorn, and the pastoral eglantine, fast fading violets covered up in leaves, and mid-May's eldest child, the coming musk rose, full of dewy wine, the murmurous haunt of flies on summer eves. Darkling I listen, and for many a time I have been half in love with easeful death, called him soft names in many a mused rhyme, to take into the air my quiet breath. Now more than ever seems it rich to die, to cease upon the midnight with no pain, while thou art pouring forth thy soul abroad in such an ecstasy. Still wouldst thou sing, and I have ears in vain, to thy high requiem become a sod. Thou wast not born for death, immortal bird. No hungry generations tread thee down. The voice I hear this passing night was heard in ancient days by emperor and clown. Perhaps the self-same song that found a path through the sad heart of Ruth when, sick for home, she stood in tears amid the alien corn. The same that oft times hath charmed magic casements opening on the foam of perilous seas in fairy lands forlorn. Forlorn. The very word is like a bell to toll me back from thee to my soul's self. Adieu. The fancy cannot cheat so well as she is famed to do, deceiving elf. Adieu. Adieu. Thy plaintive anthem fades past the near meadows, over the still stream, up the hillside, and now 'tis buried deep in the next valley glades. Was it a vision or a waking dream? Fled is that music. Do I wake or sleep?